What if Mace Windu went with Yoda to Kashyyyk in Revenge of the Sith? That's what we're going to get into today, but first, quick question for you, for the audience. Let me know in the comments, would you watch a sequel-focused What If titled, What If the Force Ghost of Anakin Came to Luke Before He Almost Killed Ben Solo in The Last Jedi? Title would be short up a bit, but, you know, basically the concept of, what if Anakin's Force Ghost went to Luke before he went into Ben's hut to ignite his lightsaber, like we saw in The Last Jedi? Anyways, let me know what you think. Just exploring different ideas. Alright, let's get into today's video, which is why you're here. Darth Sidious sat in his office, sensing that the time for his ultimate plan was close. Across the galaxy, final battles of the Clone Wars were going strong, and Anakin was nearly ready to turn. He was having nightmares of his wife dying, and the Jedi Council would soon deny Anakin the rank of Master. Anakin was desperate for an answer to save his wife, and when the time came, he would choose the only path, the dark side. But when the time does come, Sidious thinks he needs both Yoda and Windu off-world. They were perhaps the only two Jedi that could defeat him, and so Sidious enacted the first part of his plan. On Kashyyyk, he had a droid programmed to transmit signals that were very traceable to the Republic. The droid was transmitting a message to the Separatists, letting them know that Darth Sidious has arrived on Kashyyyk. This, of course, was not true, but it would be the most evidence that the Jedi have of Sidious's whereabouts for the entire war. They were blind by their hatreds of the Sith, and Sidious expected Yoda and Windu to jump at the opportunity, leaving Skywalker for himself, vulnerable and alone at the Jedi Temple without the Council. And inside of the Jedi Council, Anakin Skywalker took a seat, frustrated and angry at the Council. They had just denied him the rank of Master, despite everything he'd done for them during the war. He was the hero of the Clone Wars. He was so caught up in his own mind right now that he almost didn't realize that suddenly Commander Gree was now standing as a hologram in the middle of the Council. Anakin and the rest of the Jedi looked on as Gree apologized for interrupting, but he said he has urgent news. The high-value Separatist target, Darth Sidious, is reportedly going to be on Kashyyyk. Windu immediately leaned forward, asking how Gree knew of this, and Gree played an intercepted message from the Separatists. It was slightly distorted and not super easy to trace, but the core of the message was clear. Darth Sidious was headed for Kashyyyk. He finally made a mistake. The Jedi openly asked why this would be. Why Kashyyyk? They didn't have an answer, but they knew one thing for certain. This was an opportunity they could not pass up on, but it could be a trap. So the Jedi needed their best, and Anakin expected to be called on for this mission, but to his surprise, Windu said that he and Yoda would go to Kashyyyk, aid Masters Luminara and Quinlan Vos, who were already there. The two Jedi leaders going on a mission together was extremely rare, but this was a special circumstance. And soon the Council was dismissed, and Anakin found out why he was not called upon for the mission. He was to spy on the Chancellor and find out everything he could about the Chancellor's intentions when the war does finally come to an end. And now, Anakin was a spy for the Council, and he was the representative on the Council for the Chancellor. Everything was too much for him. But soon enough, Obi-Wan was on board a transport with Windu and Yoda as they headed toward their ship that would take them to Kashyyyk. Obi-Wan was telling the two masters that Anakin did not take kindly to his new assignment, but both Windu and Yoda were just a little too focused on Sidious to express real concern about Skywalker. In their minds, they were going to finally end this gruesome war, find out who this Darth Sidious truly is. And Obi-Wan watched as they boarded the ship to take off, praying that this comes to an end quickly, so he, Anakin, and everyone else can finally rest. The Battle of Kashyyyk ended up starting in space, as the Republic cruisers emerged in front of the Separatist blockade. Strangely, Chancellor Palpatine had approved and even offered for the Republic to bring double the clone forces that were requested. Yoda and Windu were shocked that they were getting this kind of support from Palpatine, but the more clones they could bring with, the better. And more clones meant more ships, so the Trade Federation Separatist blockade was quickly driven from the area, allowing Yoda, Windu, and the clones to aid Luminara and Quinlan on the surface, where battle droids were now ready to attack. And meanwhile, on Coruscant, Anakin had learned of Darth Plagueis, and then he learned the location of General Grievous. So a council meeting was called, where Windu and Yoda were able to break off from the battle to support the notion that Master Kenobi should go to Utapau and destroy Grievous. With Sidious on Kashyyyk and Grievous on Utapau, the Republic was on the verge of winning. And as the council was dismissed, Windu almost let himself feel some joy for the end of the war coming upon them. So he and Yoda led their clone forces into battle head-on, trying to get to the Separatist holdout and find Sidious. And meanwhile, Anakin Skywalker went to inform the Chancellor that Grievous has been engaged. And everything would change from here. All of the hope, the desperation to win, the final battles, all of it would become meaningless as Anakin walked into Palpatine's office. Anakin began telling Palpatine about Grievous, when slowly but surely, Palpatine revealed his true identity as Darth Sidious. Anakin couldn't believe what he was hearing. How was this possible? Sidious was supposed to be on Kashyyyk, but Palpatine said that was merely a distraction, so Anakin would have the opportunity to become his true self. Sidious told Anakin that through the dark side, he can achieve the power that Plagueis could not, the power to save people from dying. All he has to do is embrace the dark side, give in to it. And all of Anakin's training told him to go back to the temple, tell the Jedi about this. Despite what the creature of the dark side deep inside of him was telling him to do, Anakin flew back to the temple and found Master Kit Fisto. Anakin described what he found out, and Fisto immediately brought Anakin to a data table where Windu and Yoda were contacted. After a moment, the two Jedi answered, and loud sounds of battle could be heard behind them. Windu asked what it was they needed, and Anakin revealed the truth. As Windu and Yoda listened to Anakin, they sat behind cover and realized they were fighting in a battle that was just like the rest, a battle that had no answers at the end of it. All of the hope dissipated as the two Jedi realized they were so far from Coruscant. But perhaps they could still get back in time. Windu told Anakin and the Jedi to stay put, lock down the temple. They would return soon, and Sidious would finally be dealt with. And the call ended as Windu and Yoda informed the other Jedi and clones that the two of them must return to Coruscant immediately. They sifted through the battle, and eventually were able to make their way aboard a Republic ship. But while they spent a long time trying to get aboard the ship, events on Coruscant were shifting dramatically. Anakin sat in silence, head in his hands in the temple, as the rest of the Jedi were moving to shut down the Jedi Temple. How could he just sit here, while the only person with real answers was waiting for him across the city? Palpatine, Sidious, just expecting him while Windu and Yoda were preparing to return. And Anakin knew that the two Jedi, Windu and Yoda, would kill Sidious, leaving Anakin without his wife. He needed answers, and so he jolted up, running up to the temple hangar. And inside the hangar, Kit Fisto, Agen Kolar, and Saesee Tiin were locking down the temple as they watched Anakin board a transport. Fisto called out to Anakin, telling him to wait, and the three Jedi used the Force to stop Anakin from leaving. Anakin frustratedly landed and told the three Jedi that he could not just sit here. He said that Palpatine wouldn't have revealed himself unless he had some sort of a plan. They need to act now, he said. Fisto, Kolar, and Tiin were hesitant, but they knew that Anakin would go with or without them, so they may as well go with arrest or destroy Palpatine. And soon enough, Darth Sidious watched at his doorway as Kit Fisto, Agen Kolar, Saesee Tiin, and Anakin Skywalker ignited their lightsabers. Anakin told Sidious he was under arrest, but everyone in the room knew that he would not simply surrender. He was the Senate. He had control over the Senate and the courts, and Anakin knew from this moment he would have to make the ultimate choice. And he watched as Sidious spun from behind his desk, attacking the Jedi, and Anakin took a step back to watch as Kolar was stabbed, quickly falling down dead. Saesee Tiin and Kit Fisto battled the Sith Lord with great strength, but after a few more seconds, Saesee was decapitated, and Kit Fisto was calling out to Anakin for help. But Anakin continued to only watch, as Fisto circled around the room with Sidious. Now Fisto was an excellent duelist, and after a few more minutes of dueling, he actually disarmed Sidious. Anakin watched as the red lightsaber flew to the corner, and now instead of Fisto calling for his help, Palpatine was calling to Anakin. Palpatine saw Anakin, and he said that he must choose. And as Fisto spun for the final killing swing, Anakin chose. He threw his lightsaber to Sidious, and as Fisto completed his spin and was ready for his saber to cut through the Dark Lord, all he felt instead was a hot, burning sensation. He looked to his heart, where a blue lightsaber, the lightsaber of Anakin, was stabbed right through him. And a moment later, he died, horrified of what would now happen to the Jedi Order since he'd failed. And now Anakin knelt down in front of Sidious. He made his choice when he threw his saber to Sidious. He would be the Sith apprentice, Darth Vader. But deep down, he planned to kill Sidious and take over the Republic with only Padme by his side. Everything would go according to his plan, no one else's. And Anakin rose, as Sidious told him to storm the Jedi Temple with the 501st, while the rest of the clones around the galaxy execute Order 66. This would cement Anakin in the dark side. Mace Windu and Yoda got to the bridge of the Republic cruiser, and they were ready to take off back to Coruscant momentarily. They were above Kashyyyk, and they were both told there would be a quick delay, as the clones were now receiving new orders. This was frustrating, but would hopefully go quick. Both of the Jedi Masters looked down to Kashyyyk, watching the battle from high above, and there was a sudden shift in the Force, as if a blanket of darkness was placed over the galaxy, and both Windu and Yoda felt a shift in every single clone trooper around them. In a single moment, they'd gone from allies to sworn enemies, and suddenly, the door to the bridge opened as a wave of clone troopers poured into it. Yoda and Mace quickly ignited their lightsabers, confused as the clones began firing at them, but they deflected every single bolt, and took off in opposite directions to flank the clones. They did what they had to do, killing the troopers and running through the ship, closing blast doors behind them. Eventually, the two Jedi reached the communications room to the ship, where they planned to contact anyone they could for help, but they entered to curiously find just one clone. It was like everyone else was evacuating, and the one clone spoke into a communicator, saying, "Do it." Windu and Yoda looked around confused, when suddenly volleys of firepower were rained onto the ship. It began to shake, and immediately the two of them realized what was happening. There were 5 Republic ships in orbit. The other 4 of them were firing at this one, trying to kill Mace and Yoda. The two Jedi now knew they could not fight their way off this ship. They had to get to an escape pod immediately. And so they sprinted through the ship, stumbling over, as the other ships rained fire on them, taking out every clone they could, until they eventually arrived in front of the pods. There was only one left, and clones were beginning to board it. So Yoda pulled them out with the Force, and they cut the clones down. But not before the final clone was able to call to the other ships, telling them that the Jedi were boarding an escape pod to fire at it as soon as they could. Mace Windu cut him down, and the two looked at each other. Yoda looked to the ground, knowing they could not do this together any longer, and he told Windu that he must go, get in the pod and survive, save the Jedi, save the Republic. Yoda said he will go back to the bridge, use the Force on the cannons of the other 4 ships. He should be able to do just enough to alter their firepower, so Windu can safely land on Kashyyyk. And Windu looked down to Yoda, asking if he could just do this in the pod. But Yoda said no. The further they got away, the harder it would be to prevent the firepower from hitting them. From the bridge, Yoda could alter it, and this would be where they depart. Yoda saw Windu smile for the first time since the war began, as he genuinely thanked Yoda for everything, and said he would try to bring this to an end. And of course, Yoda said, "Do or do not. There is no try." And the two parted ways. Windu waited a few moments in the pod, and then took off when he felt like Yoda had returned to the bridge. Windu felt his pod eject, and immediately he could hear the firepower whizzing past him, blast after blast, just barely missing. Windu looked up to the ship getting further and further away as the firing stopped. They must have realized something was wrong, so the 4 ships once again rained firepower down on the one that Yoda was in. Windu said, "May the Force be with you," as he watched a chain reaction of explosions finally spread throughout the ship. Yoda held his Force grip on the ships, using all of his power in this final moment, and he finally let go, dying and fading away as the explosions reached the bridge and the ship completely exploded. The remaining 4 Republic ships fired down where Windu's pod was, and finally one shot finally clipped the pod, and Windu braced himself as it crash-landed into the trees of Kashyyyk. After a bit, Windu woke up in a daze, quickly remembering everything. He was bruised and cut up from the trees, and a darkness had come over Kashyyyk. This was good, so he could stay hidden, and he took the time to access his own communicator, along with anything inside of the broken-down escape pod. After a bit, he finally had a connection to the Jedi frequency, and he called out to silence. He tried again. Still nothing. He tried once more, and Windu was extremely relieved as the hazy image of Master Kenobi appeared. He survived. Windu described the entire situation, and Obi-Wan said the same thing happened to him. And then he told Windu that he would come and find him on Kashyyyk. After some time, events around the galaxy were finally beginning to calm down, and Anakin Skywalker stood on a Mustafar bridge, crying over what he has become. But knowing this was what he had to do to save his wife. Soon, he would be powerful enough to stop people from dying, and soon, he would kill Sidious. The galaxy would belong to him and Padme alone. And speaking of Padme, she was suddenly landing down on the Mustafar landing platform, so Anakin sprinted to meet her, ready to tell her that the galaxy was theirs to rule. But slowly, Anakin realized that Padme would not be joining him. No, instead of joining him, she now looked at Anakin like he was some sort of monster. How could she? Anakin was angry at her. He did all of this, sacrificed everything for her, and now she told Anakin that he broke her heart. Anakin was angry, and Padme continued to back up, saying they could never be together like this. Anakin reached out with the Force, the anger, pain, hatred flowing through him as he choked her, and there was no one here to stop him. Anakin felt the power inside of him, and he closed his fist. He would rule the galaxy. Padme fell to the ground, dead, and Anakin looked down at her as the hatred subsided, replaced only by one single realization. He just killed his wife. On his crusade to do anything, to save her from dying, he'd killed her himself. Anakin fell to his knees, exclaiming once again, "What have I done?" And he tried holding Padme, waking her up, force healing. He tried everything. He felt like he was going to die. He needed to get rid of this feeling. It was ripping him apart. And the only answer to hide this feeling, the dark side. And again, Anakin fully embraced the dark side. Perhaps if he goes even darker, becomes even more powerful, he can bring Padme back to life. He would do it. He had to do it. And his eyes burned with a yellow hue as he put Padme in her ship, taking off for Coruscant. He would kill Sidious and anyone who stood in his way. On Kashyyyk, Obi-Wan had eventually found Windu, and the two of them snuck around, avoiding clone troopers until they found a ship that could carry both of them. Their time on Kashyyyk was longer than they'd hoped, but they had to stay hidden. These clones had become ruthless, so when they did finally take off, the Empire was created, the Separatists were killed, the war was over, but the Sith were still alive, and so the two Jedi took off to Coruscant to kill Darth Sidious. And on Coruscant, Sidious spent a long time at his desk, underneath the Senate chambers, waiting for Vader to return. And moments later, he did. But Sidious watched as Vader entered the room, surrounded by an aura of darkness. And before he could speak to his apprentice, on the other side of the room, entered Mace Windu and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Laughter rang out from Sidious as he knew it would all come to this. A final battle for control of the galaxy. Sith versus Jedi. Sidious knew Vader wanted to kill him, and Sidious planned to weaken Vader enough to show he still had much to learn. As for the Jedi, they must die. Obi-Wan and Windu knew they had to kill Sidious, but they quickly realized that Anakin was not on their side. He somehow felt even darker than Sidious. So the Jedi quickly realized they would have to defeat Anakin and Sidious. And Anakin had one thing on his mind: power. The more power he had, the more likely it would be that he could bring Padme back. So he poured his anger into himself, giving him focus, and he ignited his lightsaber. It was now a crimson red, as he bled it on the way over. Both Windu and Obi-Wan ignited their sabers, followed by Sidious. And the fight began with a lightning-fast exchange of blows. Anakin was fueled by anger, fueled by hatred, attacking with ferocious intensity, red lightsaber clashing against Mace Windu's blade. Meanwhile, Sidious unleashed torrents of lightning, trying to overwhelm Obi-Wan. The room echoed with the hums and clashes of lightsaber, a symphony of power and skill. And Mace Windu was displaying his mastery of Vapad, his attacks relentless, putting Anakin on the defensive by using his power against him. And Anakin, however, tapped further and further into his anger, his frustration, drawing strength from the dark side, his attacks becoming wild and unpredictable, fueled by his desire for power. Sidious was observing that battle, cackling with glee, encouraging Anakin to embrace his rage fully as he dueled with Obi-Wan. As the battle raged on, the room became a battleground. Lightsabers were clashing, force powers colliding, the fate of the galaxy hanging in the balance. Each one of them pushing their skill and powers to the limit, drawing on every ounce of their training. And in the final moments of the battle, the room was engulfed in lightsaber strikes. Anakin's descent into the dark side had reached its peak, his once bright eyes now reflecting the crimson glow of his Sith lightsaber. Sidious fired a blast of lightning at him and Windu, which Anakin caught and fired back at the Dark Lord unexpectedly. With a newfound surge of power, he quickly cut through Windu's eyes, blinding him, then flipped to Sidious and stabbed the Sith Lord as he tried to get back up. The Dark Lord was shocked, then smiled as he realized Anakin was fully into the dark side. The legacy of the Sith would continue in the Chosen One, and Sidious fell back dead as Windu stumbled into the corner. And now, Obi-Wan and Anakin remained. Anakin was far more powerful, but Obi-Wan was more composed and calm, and he trained Anakin. If anyone could defeat him, perhaps it was Obi-Wan. And so the two engaged in a historic duel, one that could be the difference between light and dark ruling the galaxy, one that was of two brothers, now enemies, one that was evenly matched. The two swung with speed greater than ever before, every training session quickly turning into a fight to the death. Obi-Wan struck at the front, Anakin blocked it, but Obi-Wan had an opening on Anakin's back. But of course, Anakin easily blocked the strike from the back. It was his best move. But Obi-Wan took the opportunity to turn the move against him, elbowing Anakin in the face. Anakin stumbled backwards, and Obi-Wan spun for the kill, moving in for the stab. And at the last second, Anakin recovered. Obi-Wan stabbed forward. Anakin stabbed forward. Both of them looked down at their own chests. Suddenly, both of them had stabbed each other. And they looked up, making eye contact one last time in a moment of failure and success for both. And they fell backwards to the ground, dead. The room was silent. Palpatine was dead. Anakin was dead. Obi-Wan was dead. And in the corner, Mace Windu slowly got up, his eyesight completely gone, but he was alive. And he centered himself in the Force, using his senses to see what his eyes could not. And he slowly walked out of the room, leaving the destruction behind. Windu walked through the Senate building, eventually finding himself outside, where Bail Organa stood with a group of other senators. Bail recognized Windu, and he ran up to the Jedi Master, asking what had gone wrong, and Windu said the Emperor was dead. An emergency Senate meeting was called by Bail Organa, where he told the Senate that the Emperor was dead, then allowed the famous Mace Windu to speak. The Senate was yelling at Windu, calling him a traitor, and Windu waited for them to slow down before finally speaking. And then, Windu finally detailed everything that happened since the start of the war, everything they knew about Sidious, and how Sidious was Palpatine all along. The Senate listened. They were desperate for someone to guide them in this new peace. The war was over, and when Windu finally finished, the Senate was silent, until Windu continued on, saying that he and Bail will be co-chancellors as the remaining Jedi help to do what they were always meant to do: keep the peace in the galaxy. And folks, that's where we wrap up today. This turned into one of my longer ones. I hope you enjoyed. I promise one of these days I'll let Anakin survive. But, yeah. I got a comment recently that was like, you always have Anakin survive every single time. So, I've decided more often, at least in the last couple videos, he's going down. Let me know what you thought. I do hope you enjoyed. Appreciate you watching. Yeah, thanks. And I'll see you in the next video.